This is the Brewers POSTCAST, your instant game reaction for the Milwaukee Brewers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Sounds like a broken record, but missed opportunities once again for your Milwaukee Brewers come back to haunt them. We'll discuss all of it as they fall to the Miami Marlins in Game 2 of their 3-game series today by a final score of 4-2. Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Locked On Brewers postcast. My name is Brandon Stein. You can follow me over on X at Brandon _Snide, as well as WTMJ.com, and follow all of my work over there covering all of our Wisconsin sports teams. Lots to get on the program today. The Brewers dropping another one to the Miami Marlins, 4-2 on the road. So far, it's kind of been an up and down road trip for your Milwaukee Brewers. 2-3 so far on the road between New York and Miami. Concerns in the bullpen. Do you have any? Jared Canning with an outing today. I think he would like back. Nick Mears with an outing earlier today. I think he would like back. So we'll get to that. Missed opportunities, missed chances once again at the plate for your Milwaukee Brewers kind of have been their theme throughout the course of the entire year. Something they haven't done or didn't do in much of June, but are starting to trend back into early parts of July here. And Rhys Hoskins going down with an injury at first base. We'll also discuss that and who we could possibly see step up in his place. Jake Bauers took over for him earlier in the game. And as always, your thoughts, your comments, your reactions are all welcomed on the program. We'll get to all of it throughout the course of the show. We'll get quickly here to our scoring summary. Not a lot of scoring in this one, in a 4-2 Brewers loss. Does drop them where they were at 10 games over 500, now just at 49-40 on the season. And it does drop them a game under 500 on the road, 22-23 for your Brewers on the road. So not good record-wise on the road for your Brewers. Something they were good at last year. We'll see if they can get that turned around beginning tomorrow with Brandon Woodruff on the mound. But your scoring summary today brought to you by Gametime. Rhys Hoskins with a triple after Jackson Chourio had a hit earlier in the inning. That goes into the second inning. Rhys Hoskins with a triple. His first triple since 2022, Rhys Hoskins, that is. So a hard hit ball out to center field, misplayed, I guess you could say, for the center fielder for Miami, and that would get Rhys to third. He would stall at third base, and that we'll get to it a little bit later throughout the course of the show, but one out, and Rhys Hoskins stood at third base for the rest of that inning. So that was very frustrating, and it didn't take long for the frustration with runners in scoring position for your Milwaukee Brewers today in a 4-2 loss to start, as Rhys Hoskins was stranded there at third base for the final 2 outs of that inning. That's where the Brewers would end a 1-0 ball game. Stowers would respond, and boy, did the Miami Marlins respond in that second inning off of Chad Patrick. Patrick getting the start this afternoon in Miami. He would take the no decision. 5 innings pitched for Chad Patrick. And I know a lot of people will look at Chad Patrick's start and be like, well, 5 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, but he only threw 72 pitches. Was there an injury? Was there a concern? Chad Patrick, the third time through the batting order for Chad Patrick has not been good. And I think the Brewers are kind of picking up on that and being understanding that that's something that's kind of bit him in the backside way too many times throughout the course of his early career. He was pulled today before the third time through the lineup. Opponents on Chad Patrick, the third time through the lineup, are batting 2 ticks over 300, 302 to be exact, at the third time through the lineup. So again, that's why Chad Patrick had an early, I guess you could say early start, but I thought he was fine, for the most part. The second inning was a problem, a couple of extra base hits, Hicks also doubling to center. That would play to run. So that would give Miami a 2-1 lead after that second inning. So Chad Patrick working around some hits, working around some jams. Isaac Collins would come up to the plate in the fourth inning. He would single, Chourio would score. That would put Hoskins to second. And another frustrating aspect of that is, again, less than 2 outs. The Brewers with the guy in scoring position, unable to plate a run. That would leave the game tied at 2 apiece. And it would kind of turn into a pitcher's duel, a bullpen duel between both the Miami Marlins and the Milwaukee Brewers. And that brings us to our turning point in that 8th inning, the bottom of the 8th inning to be exact, in the Brewers' 4-2 loss over the Miami Marlins.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So Nick Mears would come in to the ball game for the Brewers in that 8th inning. As we had mentioned, Chad Patrick went 5 innings. DL Hall went 2 innings. I thought DL Hall looked fantastic. A couple of strikeouts for DL Hall. Nick Mears, on the other hand, and again, let's preface this with saying that Nick Mears has been really, really good out of the bullpen for a majority of the season. As of late, he has struggled. He faced 3 hitters today. Nick Mears, that is. 3 hitters in that 8th inning. He gave up 3 singles. One was a perfectly executed bunt. Couldn't have drawn up a better bunt. So 3 batters faced for Nick Mears, 3 singles. Bases loaded, no outs. Jared Koenig coming in, a complete mess that Jared Koenig was walking into. And he got a strikeout. So 1 out. Bases were still loaded. Got a ground out to himself. 2 outs. Down to a 1-2 count in that 8th inning. And that's exactly where Agustin Ramirez, who is going to be your player of the game as well, Agustin Ramirez singling to left field on a 1-2 count off of Jared Koenig. That would plate the 2 runs. That would give the Miami Marlins that 4-2 lead. And the Brewers 3 up, 3 down in the top of the 9th and never really stood a chance. They fall to 49-40 on the season. And to make it a little bit more annoying of a loss, and I know I love every viewer for the Locked On Brewers postcast, and I appreciate each and every one of you. A lot of you always like to get on me for saying I expect the Brewers to win every game. Look, the Miami Marlins have been playing better over the last 10 games, certainly 8-2 now over their last 10 games, and I give credit where credit is due, but the Milwaukee Brewers are a better team than the Miami Marlins. That they just are. So it was a very frustrating way for the Brewers to lose because, again, the theme of this show today and a 4-2 loss is just missed chances because they had multiple chances. And we sung his praise a lot of, those certainly in the later part of June and Joey Ortiz, but multiple chances for Joey Ortiz with bases loaded and just not able to connect, and watching 1, 2, 3 pitches right down the middle without swinging the bat and putting the ball in play with less than 2 outs. And these are the things that we had talked about this team had done earlier in April and certainly most of May. Slowly turned it around there at the end of May when they went on that 8-game win streak. Definitely turned it around in June where they were one of the best teams in all of baseball. And we're kind of reverting back to, that team that we saw in the early part of the season where you're just early chances, early opportunities. We mentioned in the 2nd inning, you're able to put the pressure on the Miami Marlins. You played a run. You have Rhys Hoskins standing on 3rd base with less than 2 outs, and nobody can put the ball in play and get that run across. And that's the little thing that this team had been doing much better of, as we had mentioned in June, and has completely gone away from it over this, so far 5-game road trip. They'll finish it up tomorrow in Miami with Brandon Woodruff on the mound. But this is kind of the things we saw in New York, the other day where they were 3 for 12. Today, with runners in scoring position, 3 for 10. 3 for 10 for your Milwaukee Brewers offensively with runners in scoring position where they left 8 guys on base. And multiple times they were leaving guys on base. They began or were in that inning with less than 2 outs and guys in runners in scoring position. So I think that's where the frustrating aspect offensively for the Milwaukee Brewers is. And I know some of you that listen and watch the show, again, my appreciation to all of you, will say, well, stop talking about the offense. That was one comment. Stop talking about the offense. I have to talk about the offense. I know the bullpen today wasn't good. I understand Nick Mears, not his best stuff today. Jared Koenig, so close to getting out of that mess that Nick Mears created. It was so close. I understand Abner Uribe as of late hasn't been what I like to call him as one of the best relief pitchers, maybe the best relief pitcher in all of baseball. I understand those things are still true and they still hold value, and those are factual statements. But the offense has got to be better, guys. It just has to be better. One bright spot today, Jackson Chourio, 3 for 4 for the Milwaukee Brewers. 3 for 4, and he scored 2 runs. Outside of that, Bryce Terrain, 0 for 4. Rhys Hoskins, as we had mentioned, he had a triple. He was 1 for 1 with an RBI. Rhys exited that game in the 4th inning. So we'll see, I'm sure, throughout the course of maybe they'll wait till they return home. Probably won't see Rhys Hoskins in the lineup tomorrow. Christian Yelich, William Contreras, a combined 2 for 8 today, and Sal Frelick in the leadoff spot, 1 for 5. I'm not asking everybody to bat 300. I'm not asking everybody to hit 3-4 home runs every game. Consistency, though, a little bit of consistency and timely hitting. It just, if you're going to talk about playoffs and you're going to talk about catching the Chicago Cubs in the National League Central, who, by the way, to add another frustrating aspect of the loss here for you, the Cubs lose today. The Brewers, it always seems like happened that way, where there was a good portion there in June where the Cubs were losing and the Brewers were winning, and they were starting to inch towards the top of the NL Central, but the Brewers unable to win games that the Chicago Cubs lose. So unfortunately, the Cubs lose today. The Cardinals do win because they beat the Cubs, but the Brewers unable to capitalize in that department. So good things are still happening with this team, right? The pitching is getting healthy. We talked about Nestor Cortes in Nashville. I believe we talked about him on Wednesday night, Thursday night. I forgot which night exactly to be exact, but we talked about Nestor Cortes with an outstanding outing in Nashville in his rehab assignment. Brandon Woodruff is on his way back. Freddie Peralta has been fantastic. 9 wins on the season so far. Jacob Mizorowski, we saw him in New York. He had a little bit of a moment, a big league moment, but we'll see him coming up against the LA Dodgers. So starting pitching, starting to finally get healthy. Bullpen is going to be something this team figures out, but they have arms here and they have arms down in Nashville. So we'll see exactly, where the bullpen goes. But the one thing that needs to be consistently better, because we've seen the bullpen be great. We've seen starting pitching be great. The offense has just been too up and down. And when you play teams like Miami, and it seems like when the Brewers play those bottom dwellers, the offense kind of seems to go through these peaks and valleys. I need just consistency offensively from this Milwaukee Brewers, especially, guys, when you have those runners in scoring position. Lots more to get to on the program. So many of you lined up over on YouTube. We'll get all of your reaction coming up and the things you'll be talking about tomorrow in a 4-2 Milwaukee Brewers loss to the Marlins in Miami. Coming up right after this. Today's Locked On Brewers postcast is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided last minute you want to head to a ball game? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in those stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab those last minute tickets without any of the stress. They make buying tickets fast and simple, and the price on the app, believe it or not, actually drops the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I went on Gametime, guys. The Milwaukee Brewers are welcoming in the defending champs, the LA Dodgers, and I went on Gametime, and you can go and watch game 1 or game 2 for almost less than $20. Game 1's at about $16 for the lowest ticket. Game 2's $22. And just so you know, that's probably going to change because it's going to be Mizorowski versus Clayton Kershaw in that game. So you can go to the Brewer game for less than $20, and I can tell you how you can almost go for free if you use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download the app, create an account, use that code Locked On MLB. You can go to game 1 or game 2 for practically free when you use code Locked On MLB. You get that $20 off voucher. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Once again, Gametime. Download the app. Use promo code Locked On MLB. A frustrating one for your Milwaukee Brewers. They fall on the road once again. This one to the Miami Marlins in game 2 by a final score of 4-2. Chad Patrick getting the start for the Brewers, going 5 innings, allowing 2 earned runs as we begin with our everydayer drum. And he says Chad Patrick never gets run support when he is pitching. I know there's been a lot of Brewers fans that have been up and down on Chad Patrick. I still love Chad Patrick. I love what he brings. There was a good portion of the early part of the season where Chad Patrick may have been your best pitcher. Certainly that's not the case right now, but Chad Patrick still has the stuff. And I still firmly believe in Chad Patrick. Will he be one of those guys that the Brewers, option down, because of the guys like Brandon Woodruff and Nestor Cortes maybe making their return after the All-Star break? We'll see, but I agree. It just feels like not a lot of pitchers are getting a lot of run support throughout this Brewers offense. June was different, but outside of June, and you take that away, and it just seems like it's very, very up and down. Charles over on YouTube, part of our everydayer crew. What is up with Ortiz? 2 strikeouts, looking at a pitch right down the middle. That one with bases loaded was a killer. Very, very frustrating. I put it on my X account at Brandon_Snide. I love Joey O. Is almost reading my tweet in my head. I love Joey O, but Charles, I don't know what he was looking for. I don't know what he was waiting for. I don't know. The first 2 were right down the middle. Again, I'm not asking you to hit a grand slam like you did a couple of games ago. I love it. I'm asking you to put the ball in play. I'm asking you to create and generate some runs. And that was what we had seen that bottom of the order doing so good today. 1 for 7 combined between Caleb Durbin and Joey Ortiz. I guess if you want to mix in Isaac Collins, he was 1 for 4 in that 7, 8, 9 spot for the Milwaukee Brewers. But 2 hits out of your bottom portion of the order where you left 8 guys on base and you were 3 for 10. And that was a killer. It was an absolute killer because it was an opportunity, I feel like, to kind of break the game open a little bit. I mean, even if you create a sac fly, or you're able to maybe, I think there was 1 out in that inning. So, a fielder's choice wouldn't do anything there, but something, just a great opportunity offensively in this game for that guy, Joey Ortiz, who's been really good for the Brewers. Certainly in June, he was, to kind of create something and was just unable to get anything going, as was the rest of the team today. Again, 3 for 10, leaving 8 guys on base. Michael over on YouTube, even with Mears digging himself into a hole in the 8th, the offense never really got it going in this game. They never did. And let's hypothetically, and I know this isn't really fun to do, but we're going to do it anyway. Hypothetically, Jared Kinning works pulls a rabbit out of his hat in that 8th and is able to get the Brewers out of that jam. Who knows what could happen, right? Well, I don't know what the outcome would have been for the Brewers, but they just offensively were kind of felt like just dead in the water today offensively. Just no juice, outside that Rhys Hoskins triple and Jackson Chourio with a handful of hits. Nobody really else in the Brewers lineup provided anything for your Milwaukee Brewers. Jim over on YouTube, part of our everydayers, he is outraged at the lack of run support for Chad Patrick. He says, no run support for Chad. This is an absolute outrage. It's very, very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. And it goes to the point of kind of the theme of the season throughout the course of certainly the early parts of the year, a lot of May, late May, early June, and most of June, it was kind of sort of figured out. But when the Milwaukee Brewers when the Milwaukee Brewers are not playing their best, it's because offensively, they're just not generating anything. And when we've seen this team, and a lot can be said, well, any team that doesn't score isn't going to win. Okay, yes. But the way this team is built, right? The way that this team is built, when they score over 4 runs, they're one of the best teams in all of baseball. In all of baseball, they're one of the best teams. And the way that they're set up defensively, the way they're set up in the bullpen, and I know today wasn't a shining example for that, but the way they're starting pitching is constructed, it's not asking a lot for an offense to score 4 runs. It's just not in 2025. Nick, part of our everydayers over on YouTube. Sorry, Brandon, but we need a bat. I need someone I can turn to and depend on in clutch situations. Pitching didn't help today, but if you're going to beat these teams, and the schedule is not going to get easier, I think in those clutch situations, you have bats. I still believe in Jackson Chourio to be a clutch bat. I still believe in William Contreras. I know the year isn't the year we expected out of William Contreras, but I still believe in William Contreras despite those struggles. And I still believe in Christian Yelich, guys. I think Christian Yelich is having, a really, really good year. And I understand, again, I'm looking at the glass half full, and today maybe not be the greatest day to look at those, but I still think that, I think that there's still those clutch guys. Of course, you're going to need a bat though. And I'm curious, as we had talked about, what this Brewer team does with the plethora of starting pitching that they have, because it is a plethora of starting pitching, especially if Cortez is healthy, as is Brandon Woodruff, and we'll see Brandon Woodruff tomorrow. CJ over on YouTube, keep talking about the offense. They screwed us for years. Yeah, I understand that. I understand the frustration where people are asking me, why am I talking about the offense, or stop talking about the offense? But right now, today when you're 3 for 10 and you leave 8 guys on base, and one of those guys you left on base, you weren't able to generate anything after that, second inning, really, outside of that Rhys Hoskins triple, as well as, Jackson Chourio getting started at the plate. But offense has to be talked about, guys. It has to be talked about. It's something I have to talk about because right now in a game like today, when you're 3 for 10 and you leave 8 guys on base, that's the reason you lose, right? Nick Mears doesn't help loading the base, sure. But Jared Kinning gets out of that inning, he gives up 2 runs, but you lose 4-2, and you leave 8 guys on base. And one of those innings, you left the bases loaded with less than 2 outs and didn't score a run. That's your difference maker. Jason over on YouTube, 100%. These are games we need to be winning, and these are the ones we have dropped so far during this season. I know it's like everybody says, oh, baseball's a long year, and It's just another game, but we've seen games come down to game 163, right? Go back to that 2018 season with the Chicago Cubs, right? Like these games do matter, especially in games where you should win. And I know a lot of you will say I'm too optimistic or I'm too much of a homer, but I expect the Brewers to beat the Marlins. I do. On the road, at American Family Field, at Lake Geneva, at the Wisconsin Dells, you name it. Miami Beach, it don't matter. I expect this Milwaukee Brewers team to beat the Miami Marlins. Jason, even if Woodruff is on it, our bats need to be more efficient and alive as well. Exactly. You can have the greatest starting pitching. You can have the greatest defense. You can have the greatest relief. You can have the best closer. If you're not able to score, you're going to lose. If you're not able to score more than 2 runs, 3 runs a game in today's game, you're going to lose more times than not. And that's exactly what we saw from the Brewers. This is a very, very winnable game. And I'm not down on this team still. I still believe in this team. You're 9 games over 500. The proverbial hole that we had talked about at lengths multiple times early in April and May and parts of, early parts of June, they climbed out of. They have been way better, much better. But you have to create that consistency going forward. You can't just have a great June, kind of have a so-so May, a really bad April, and then think the season's, over. Are they looking ahead to the All-Star break? I don't think so. I don't think Murphy would allow that. But they got to create and generate some consistency. The Cubs lose today. The Cardinals do win. You're unable to really gain any ground in the National League Central. Again, it's a little early for me to be worried about the standings, but it's hard not to look at what the Cubs are doing and the games they're winning and losing. And it seems to happen in the same fashion that the Brewers, win and the Cubs win, or the Brewers lose and the Cubs lose. So it becomes something that you just generate yourself to always look at the end of each night. A couple more comments here before we wrap things up in a 4-2 Milwaukee Brewers loss. Speaking of Jared Koenig, this one's from Landon. It feels like every time he comes into pitch, it feels like he is allowing hits and runs. He was so close to getting out of that. I mean, he was so close. Jared Koenig, that is. ERA now over 4. Those runs weren't accredited to him. Those were Nick Mears runs. But, man, when the bases got loaded, I'll be quite honest. When the bases were loaded and Nick Mears left, I immediately began prepping the show for a loss. And it's not, you're not trying to be negative or say, it's Jared Koenig coming in. He hasn't been on his stuff. He hasn't been, I think Mears, I think Koenig, maybe Abner, maybe a little overused in the last handful of weeks. And again, All-Star break coming out, I think a good time for, especially for this bullpen, maybe for the offense to kind of reset and get back to what made them so good in June. But I still believe in a lot of those guys in that bullpen, and Jared Koenig is one of them. I know Nick Mears didn't have a great Nick Mears didn't have a great game today. I still believe in him in the long run. He was such an anchor for this team out of the bullpen for most of the season. Final comment here from Cody, part of our everydayers. This road trip has been pathetic. It's a great comment because I completely agree. I do. When the Brewers left and the way that they lost prior to taking off on the road, I got to go back to their opponent on the road. And it was a game where they should have won and they lost. Let's see here. It was the Rockies. Perfect. The Rockies. And they had a 4-game win streak. They lost to the Rockies in that Sunday matinee 4-3 getaway game. And I said, I hope it feels like that homestand. And I know it was a great homestand, but it started with a loss to the Pirates and it ended with a loss to the Rockies. And in between that was 4 wins. On the surface, on paper, it looks great. 4-2 homestand. But I said, I don't know. I didn't like that loss to the Rockies. It left a bad taste in my mouth. But then you go to New York and you win game 1 and you win it convincingly. The doubleheader out there, game 1, 7-2. And Mizorowski looked human and it was 1-1. You're like, okay, split the doubleheader, get him back in game 3. Well, game 3, they were unable to really do anything offensively, losing 3-2, much like what we saw today, 4-2 to the Miami Marlins. Then you bounce back in an up and down, back and forth game on July 4th, where you win 6-5, wasn't the prettiest of wins. And they're like, okay. And then today, Chad Patrick trots out there and 5 innings of work, 2 earned runs. I think any of us would take that on any day from Chad Patrick. And you fall because you're unable to do the things that we had said you had done so well in June. And certainly they did. And it hasn't been good because the New York Mets were one of the worst teams in baseball going into that 3-game series. Losers of 14 of their last 17 games. The Mets were. And you allowed them to kind of crawl back in and kind of pump some life back into their season, which I was afraid of. The Marlins had been playing better, but still aren't a good team. And you squeaked out a win on July 4th, 6-5. And then today, just unable to muster any offense as the Brewers fall 4-2 to the Marlins in Miami, 49-40 on the season. We'll see if Brandon Woodruff on the mound tomorrow can get the Brewers back on track. We'll talk about it after that game. My thanks to each and every one of you for always tuning in and always making Locked On Brewers part of your day. Remember, wherever you get podcasts, you can listen to this program, the Locked On Brewers Postcast, as well as the Locked On Brewers daily podcast with my guy, Chuck Freeman, Apple, Google, Spotify, all those terrific podcast apps right here. Also on YouTube, just go to that search bar, type in Locked On Brewers, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, get notified when we go live, and we will go live tomorrow afternoon after the rubber match between the Milwaukee Brewers and the Miami Marlins with Brandon Woodruff on the mound. Once again, my thanks to each and every one of you. My name is Brandon Snyder. You can follow me on social media at X, at Brandon_Snyder, as well as WTMJ.com. We'll talk to you tomorrow after the Brewers and Marlins Game 3. And as always, win, lose, or draw, it is always Go Brewers.